What's a NSFW history fact that we don't often hear about? Anton Leeuwenhoek, the father of microscopy, used his invention, the microscope, on his own sperm after one night with his wife. Sperm was unknown at the time, and he thought they were little people. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh would periodically masturbate into the Nile as a ritual of sorts to guarantee good harvests. Brazilian emperor built a huge personal library just so he could freely shag his mistresses without being bothered. Felix Faure, French president from 1895 to 1899, died while getting head. Boston Corbett, the guy who killed John Wilkes Booth, Lincoln's assassin, was a raging lunatic who cut his own balls off with a pair of scissors after passing a couple of prostitutes on the street. He did not seek medical attention after he did that until after he had gone to a prayer meeting and had dinner. He also escaped from an insane asylum on horseback and was never seen again. Hawaiian kings commonly had harems of both male and female lovers. The first European to make a Hawaiian to English dictionary didn't want to scandalize his Victorian readers, so translated the term for the male lovers to something like intimate friend. This caused some degree of confusion when missionaries arrived asking to become the intimate friends of the Hawaiian nobility. When the future Edward VII balked at his mistress's accounts saying, "Madam, I have spent enough on you to build a battleship," she replied, "And you have spent enough in me to float one." William the 100th, Minor, one of the contributing writers of the Oxford English Dictionary, chopped off his penis using the pocket knife he used to cut the bound pages of his old first edition book. In July 1184, Henry VI, King of Germany, later Holy Roman Emperor, held court at a Hoftag in the Petersburg Citadel in Erfurt. On the morning of the 26th of July, the combined weight of the assembled nobles caused the wooden second-story floor of the Peterskirk to collapse, and most of them fell through into the latrine cesspit below the ground floor, where about 60 of them drowned in liquid excrement. There is a man named Eben Byers who is entombed in Pittsburgh's Allegheny National Cemetery. He was a golf pro and socialite who ended up being the victim of quack medicine. He consumed so much raditha, radium dissolved in water, that just prior to his death his jaw literally eroded off of his face. His mausoleum has him in a lead coffin, because he's still radioactive. It used to be thought that blowing smoke up someone's ass was a way to revive them. Some swimming pools actually had a kit with a bellows type device. The blow smoke up the ass of a drowning victim. Edited to clarify tobacco smoke. John R. Brinkley was an American doctor who would surgically implant goat testicles into men's scrotums to cure impotence. His story gets crazier from there. Ancient Rome was covered in penises. All around Pompeii, excavators discovered phallic symbols from intricately carved 3D cock and balls to scribbled graffiti on street corners, above bread ovens, outside houses, in bathhouses, literally dicks everywhere. When Pompeii was discovered in the 1700s, this fact was suppressed by puritanical types in the church. Italians of the area now use chili peppers as a replacement symbol, including as a necklace pendant you will see everywhere. Of course, peppers didn't exist in Europe until Columbus returned from the New World. So chili pepper now equates to cock in southern Italy, and if you walk around Pompeii, look out for all the dicks. Romans used to execute criminals in the Colosseum by recreating myths. A woman was raped to death by a specially trained bull, Pasiphae. A man was given wings and thrown across the Colosseum, Icarus. Another was made to play an instrument and then be torn apart by animals, Orpheus, and many, many more. Rome lost as many soldiers in one battle as the United States lost in the entirety of the Vietnam War. It was the Battle of Cannae in 216 BC against Hannibal. And this was back when the entire world population was tiny compared to what it is now. Rome lost 20% of its adult male population in a single day. Edit. Extra Credits did a great series on the Punic Wars. There was a birth control plant in Roman times, but it went extinct because the Romans did a certain action too much. Edit. The action was intercourse, and they used the plant so much it went extinct. At the beginning of World War II, in Great Britain, over 750,000 domestic animals were euthanized out of fear that rations would be spread too thin and pet abandonment would lead to masses of strays. The National Air Raid Precautions Animal Committee, NAPAC, sent pamphlets out to homes suggesting that people should send their pets to the countryside or kindly have them destroyed. This later became known as the British Pet Massacre. President Lyndon B. Johnson was obsessed with his penis and used it to control those around him. He gave it the nickname Jumbo. He'd threatened senators by saying he was gonna sleep with their wives, and if he went to the bathroom in the middle of a conversation, he expected the other person to follow him into the bathroom to continue the conversation, and would get upset if they tried to just wait outside. Sometimes he would swing around while standing at a urinal and talking to someone, leaving his genitals exposed. He also drove himself around on his ranch and stopped to pee on the side of the road, so the Secret Service agents had to cover him, and there was a gust of wind that blew the pee onto one of the agent's legs, and Johnson said that it was his prerogative to pee on the agent's leg. Journalists once asked him why continue the war in Vietnam, and he sent all the women out of the room, took his penis out, flopped it on the table, and said this is why. Mozart composed a song which literally translates to lick me in the ass. Source. The artificial sweetener aspartame was discovered when a researcher thought it smelled sweet and had a taste in his laboratory. The first rule of chemistry is apparently never to taste anything. So definitely NSFW. Ammonia-rich fumes from a castle's toilet system were used to delouse clothes inside special closets. Didn't the author of Frankenstein lose her virginity on her mother's grave? That Genghis Khan killed so many people. He lowered the ppm of CO2 in the atmosphere. Much of what formed initial, early internet commerce was pioneered by porn sites. Julia Swana-Joreg won the 1927 Nobel Prize for Medicine by giving people malaria. The fever from the malaria would go so high that it could kill off an otherwise untreatable syphilis infection. Left untreated, syphilis could lead to insanity, so it was pretty bad thing. In comparison, having malaria, which we had treatments for, was a blessing. The Japanese occupation of China, Korea and the Philippines include the kidnapping of girls and women and house them in brothels to become comfort women, to be raped repeatedly by Japanese soldiers. The Japanese government denies this. Lawsuits and UN pressured them to concede certain aspect of this blatant sex slavery. A lot of the details go undocumented and only lives on by recorded testimonies of the very few who are unfortunate enough to have survived to their hell and lived to tell about it. An American nun in China tried to protect his students from being taken. She was so distraught she committed suicide. In the 90s, a Chinese American author made it her mission to record as many testimonies as she could and put it in a nighttime best-selling book. But the stories were so horrifying, she committed suicide. There used to be a parasite in ancient Egypt which caused boys/men to bleed through their penises. Apparently, it was so common among men that ancient Egyptian thought that men had periods. Thomas Jefferson had syphilis and loved hookers. People think that Vlad the Impaler stuck people with spikes through the guts, but that isn't what impaling is. It's so much worse. First you get a thick log, maybe 1.5 fists thick. Then you carve the tip into a blunt bullet shape. Too sharp and the spike will go through the victim too fast. Too blunt, and the victim won't be properly impaled. You grease up the spike with lard. You insert the bullet-shaped end into the victim's anus. You push it into at least a foot or more as in the victim. Then you haul them up. If you've calculated everything right, then the victim will remain alive, twitching, and completely unable to stop what is happening to him or her. Yes, this happened to women too, for days. Ultimately, the spike will erupt from the upper chest, back, or head. Fortunately, the victim will have died before then. And the Sultan's army entered into the area of the impalements, which was 17 stades long and 7 stades wide. There were large stakes there on which, as it was said, about 20,000 men, women, and children had been spitted. Quite a sight for the Turks and the Sultan himself. The Sultan was seized with amazement and said that it was not possible to deprive of his country a man who had done such great deeds, who had such a diabolical understanding of how to govern his realm and its people. And he said that a man who had done such things was worth much. The rest of the Turks were dumbfounded when they saw the multitude of men on the stakes. There were infants too affixed to their mothers on the stakes, and birds had made their nests in their entrails. I would rather be stuck through the guts with a spear than suffer actual impalement. The dildo was invented before the wheel. After Napoleon's death, it's been alleged and told to me by a historian at Les Invalides that his penis was cut off and sold and exhibited through the early 20th century. It was described in 1927 as resembling a piece of leather or a shriveled eel. The British Academy of Science redacted massive amounts of the first published observations of penguins by biologists. Penguins are the worst. So much rape. So much necrophilia. The Academy decided the public wouldn't handle it well. Casanova had regular sex with his daughter and said words along the lines of "No man can love his daughter like a father can." What the actual fuck? The reason powder wigs were so popular among the wealthy was because it covered up the smell and sores of syphilis. I can't find the story because I don't want to end up on a list. In the 19th century, New Orleans brothels were notorious for having underage sex workers. There's a kinda famous biography of one that said she started when she was 10 years old. Doesn't get much more NSFW than that. The Mongols had a rule: you're not allowed to kill the leader of a country or city-state by piercing their skin. So they came up with ingenious ways of killing people. There were stories of a potential Khan that boiled a man alive. Other stories include pouring molten gold down a man's throat. Though not necessarily NSFW. Genghis Khan gave cities the option of surrendering, or face the option of killing every man, woman, and child in that city. He would literally genocide everyone in that city because the ruler wanted to fight back. And that's how Genghis Khan killed 10% of the world's population at that time. 20 to 40 million people. How Cleopatra once seduced another country's ruler by posing naked in a rolled up carpet and having her servants unroll her as a gift in the ruler's chamber. Can't remember exact details, but something along those lines. The raping of local women was commonly seen as a mean to keep invading soldiers' morale high. Local women would cover their faces with charcoal, ash and dirt to be unattractive so as to avoid the same predicament. Some even went as far as harming themselves to produce unappealing scars on their faces and bodies. Raphael Sanzio, the Italian Renaissance painter, died due to a fever after a night of excessive sex. So that pretty much confirmed too much sex can kill you. The Battle of Changping claims to be one of the most bloodiest battles of human history. One of the leaders, Baekje, decided to bury alive hundreds of thousands war prisoners in order to assert dominance. I don't think the Japanese ever hear about what the Japanese did in World War II. That shit is not safe for any place. The guy who invented cornflakes, John Kellogg, hated masturbation, so he recommended a bland diet which included his cereal to prevent kids from touching themselves and appropriately also putting acid on the clit or sewing the foreskin closed. Edit. It was actually John's brother William who invented cornflakes by accident, but John still recommended cornflakes to people in their diet as well as other things to prevent masturbation. The Spartan warriors, although as ruthless as claimed, were sexually fluid and had huge orgies. Greek men would have anal sex to show camaraderie and strength. King Edward VII and his mighty sex chair. Hitler was very anti-drugs in the 1930s. By the end he was on barbiturates, methamphetamines, coke and amphetamines. The CIA gave unsuspecting civilians LSD and then observed their interactions with hookers, paid informants, while under the influence, for experimental purposes. This operation was called Midnight Climax. Edit, for clarity. Added sources for your infotainment. King Edward VII of England got fat from partying too much and couldn't have sex in certain positions he liked. Either he or his prostitutes would get tired, so he had a special chair designed and made for him so he could keep banging chicks, sometimes two at a time. In 1345, the Mongols, although not knowing about germ theory, unwittingly created germ warfare when they catapulted their own corpses across Kaffa during a long siege that wasn't going well for them. The people fled and spread the Black Plague throughout harbor to harbor. The sex crimes from Unit 731 in Japan. During WWII, female prisoners were raped frequently and intentionally and unintentionally given stees. Soldiers would continue to sexually assault women, even after they were infected, and call them jam-filled buns or jelly buns, because they bled vaginally while infected with syphilis, chlamydia, etc. The story of Junko and the Accuser kids. Fucking depressing and enraging. James Joyce had a fart fetish. He often wrote about it in letters to his lover. And you had an ass full of farts that night, darling. And I fucked them out of you. Big fat fellows. Long windy ones. Quick little Mary cracks and a lot of tiny little naughty farties ending in a long gush from your hole. It is wonderful to fuck a farting woman when every fuck drives one out of her. Buddhist monk from Bhutan Drukpa Kunli was known for his crazy methods of enlightening other beings, mostly women, which earned him the title the Saint of 5,000 women. Among other things, women would seek his blessing in the form of sexual intercourse. His intention was to show that it is possible to be enlightened, impart enlightenment, and still lead a very healthy sex life, and to demonstrate that celibacy was not necessary for being enlightened. Because of this power to awaken unenlightened beings, Kunli's penis is referred to as the thunderbolt of flaming wisdom, and he himself is known as the fertility saint. For this reason, women from all around the world visited his monastery to seek his blessing. Some of his most famous performances include urinating on sacred thankas, stripping down naked, or offering his testicles to a famous lama. He is one of very few Buddhist teachers to almost always appear in Bhutanese paintings topless. It is known that Drukpa Kunli would not bless anyone who came to seek his guidance and help unless they brought a beautiful woman and a bottle of wine. Ancient Greeks loved their homies. The wife was just an object for making kids, while the real romantic love was reserved only for the boys. Usually literally boys. There was a ritual that is believed to have taken place towards the end of the Viking era, while people were still pagan just before Christianity took over. A horse penis is chopped off, wrapped in linen and onions, to preserve it, and people would recite poetry to it. Edit, some top-notch replies to this having a right good laugh. In the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan's wife could only eat her cucumbers chopped, so that she doesn't masturbate. Pavlov, of Pavlov's dogs fame, the famed Russian scientist, actually tested the phenomenon on orphaned young children as he could starve them with little or no criticism or complaint. There's some shocking B/W footage knocking about on the internet that looks like they have had equipment surgically inserted into their cheek. Dark. When the Allied soldiers entered Germany at the end of World War II, they raped women and children. It was mostly the Russians. The Russians had an eye to take revenge of Germany's invasion of the motherland. From January 1945, when the Russians arrived in big huge long lines of troops and tanks, no female was safe. The Russians, even the women, were happy with an anything goes attitude. Some of the Russian women even cheered and clapped as German women and girls were gang raped every single night for months. The nights were filled with the screams of women and girls who begged their rapists to kill them rather than continue to endure the rapes. Natalia Jess, a Soviet war correspondent, would later say, "The Russian soldiers were raping every German female from 8 to 80. It was an army of rapists. They raped children. So much for the conquering heroes. This of course you won't find in any Russian history book." Puttanesca takes its name from the Italian word for whore, puttana. Sex workers used to make it for their male clients before they'd return home to their wives to mask the smell of perfume. Since it had such a pungent odor, anchovies, olives, capers. Edward II was executed by having a red-hot poker shoved into his anus via bull's horn. Edited. Everyone who says this is a myth, I want my college tuition back. LBJ's Large Johnson. Nancy Reagan's head game. Winston Churchill roaming the White House in his birthday suit. My favorite historical character. She once took a fancy to a guy's date at a ball, so he challenged her to a duel. She beat like 5 guys before they gave up. Angst, La Maupin, Julie d'Aubigny, was a French bisexual opera singing sword fighter from 17th century France, known as one of history's greatest rascals. She led a life so wild, complete with duels, grave robbing and burning convents, that she had to be pardoned by the King of France not once, but twice. The values we have for electrical conductivity through people, flesh, bones, etc. were actually tested and researched by the Nazi Germans during the WWII. This has helped today by determining safety values and proper personal protection for electricians. The Tuskegee Syphilis Study. The US government intentionally gave syphilis to almost 400 African American farmers/sharecroppers to observe the effects of the disease, and didn't inform many of the participants of the nature of the experiment. They intentionally withheld the treatment, penicillin, when it became available. They were incentivized by the offer of free healthcare, but were actually given placebos and ineffective procedures. Multiple participants died. Around 40 of the patients' wives were infected with syphilis and 19 children were born with congenital syphilis. Many participants had debilitating consequences, even if they didn't die, like neurosyphilis. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop a like. If you would like to see more content like this in the future, subscribe and turn on notifications to be notified about future videos. Now check out one of these interesting videos.